Morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning. Good morning, Louie. Good morning, Bud. Hope you're doing well. Morning, Bitcoiners. Morning. Morning, Robert. Indeed. Good morning. We've got a purple heart, some coffee, some sun, and a thumbs up. We love it. We love it, Robert. Excellent. And I gotta say, we got a very bright sun coming in this morning. Blindingly bright. It's nice. It's a bit of a haze. I don't know what kind of haze, if it's humidity or if it's the smoke still. We're not sure. Little hazy. I'm going to be heading back to the city today because it gets a little humid out here in the country. And I'm going to take a night away from Vermont back to Montreal for a couple of days. There's some rain coming, so there's not going to be as much to do here. So I'm looking forward to that. But like I said, we got a maximum sunrise this morning. Not sure what's happening in the sky, but bright enough. Sun is certainly up. Bitcoin running. We're good. All that's left to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Adam says farming human. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Farming humans. Right? We're going to be talking about farming humans. Someone mentioned it in a tweet, and I thought I'd bring it up. I actually forgot to tag him. It's a fellow named Owen Benjamin, but we'll get to it in 1 second. All right. So before we get to the farming human question, we got to stop for some Moscow time. What's the fakest news I can find? Well, I don't know if this one's a surprise, but it's true, right? CNBC reporting that resumes including they, them pronouns are more likely to be overlooked. So they're not getting jobs, guys. Resumes including these things, just it's not happening for them. It's not happening. They're not getting hired. We don't know why. The White House has come out and said that they are not going to find the cocaine culprit. It's unlikely, right? So they're not going to find it. We don't know. All kinds of images last night of Hunter maybe doing a line of coke on the Truman patio in the White House. Some people said it was a bump. I don't know. I saw, it's confusing. I saw him walk and sort of hide like this. Maybe he did it. I saw him pretty like this too. A lot of people talking about that today. But, right, we're saying lines may have been snorted and crossed, but it's impossible to know by whom. So lines have been snorted and crossed. Pretty good. NBC coming at us with the following. A high body mass index is not necessarily associated with a higher risk of death. Study finds, right? So a body mass index in the range considered overweight or even obese is not necessarily associated with a higher risk of death, a new study has found. There you go. How about this one? A transgender pedophile, 66 years old, was spared jail after the case was delayed over discussions about whether the pervert should go to a male or female jail. So not going to go to jail because we don't really know where to send the person. In the same vein, this is another one here, that a boy was left unclothed, they say. The boy was left unclothed after a Burgess Hill sexual assault by two women. All right, well, one of the women was 6'3" and 200 pounds. Some people saying maybe they were not those kind of women, the kind you're used to hearing about in the news. Maybe these were along the same lines as this woman who didn't make it to jail because they didn't know which prison to put her in. Don't want to misgender anyone. Don't want to do that, right? We don't like misgendering. Some people say that the headline could have read, now normally we don't put a punchline in Moscow time, right? But someone else wrote the headline and said a boy was sexually assaulted by two men. What? Whoa. So the headline of two women, not quite the same thing, right? So, but this place the media has left folks like with this headline, right? Two women assault a male, and one of the women is 6'3", 200 and something pounds. it kind of reminds you just how difficult it is to navigate the news today, yesterday, how long it's been difficult, just how many tricksters there are out there, just, and not the kind of trickster that Bitcoin Graffiti likes, not the mythological trickster that's a little fun, right? We're talking about people who are really trying to deceive you and lie to you and do some of the worst things you can imagine. And everyone today talking about Larry Fink, right? The guy who created ESG, or didn't create, but helped popularize. I was corrected the other day. He did not create ESG, but he was one of the first people in a letter years ago that he said that's going to be the goal of BlackRock from then on, and these things. So Larry Fink yesterday came out on Fox News. Liz Clayman, a show I've been on many times. Liz Clayman is a nice lady. I used to go on that show very regularly. Funny enough, I was on one of those flights coming back from Paris, one of the last flights out of Europe when COVID lockdowns just began, if you remember, in March 2020. And I flew into New York, and I beat the lockdowns and the first public cases of COVID in New York by just a couple of days. And Liz Clayman asked me to be on the show the day the whole market was melting down and things were crazy and da-da-da-da. And I had to tell her the truth. I said, I just got off an airplane. And technically I should be quarantined, and, you know, I'm not sure what's going on. I already had COVID. I said to them, I'm not too worried about it. And so they say, yeah, well, we don't even know what you're talking about. They didn't, no one knew then, right? This is like March 6th or something. So I go, they you know, pick me up at my house, drive me to the studio. And then again, I tell them, I said, I don't know if I should be on the studio with, like, soundstage with her. So that was the first time they put me into like a separate room, but no one knew any of this stuff at the time, right? So anyway, Fink is on Liz Clayman's show yesterday, and he goes out and says, Bitcoin is digital gold. We love Bitcoin. Everyone loves Bitcoin. It's so great. Da, 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 da. Everyone calling him a chief marketing officer and things like that, right? Now, Brian Rommel, who we love, right? If you guys are not following at Brian Rommel, the Rommel is spelled Roemmele. He, to me anyway, is the greatest mind operating in the AI space. He is doing something that I predicted a long time ago, that we would all have our own AI. I wrote a story, The Satoshi Wedding Murders, called Satoshi Wedding Murders, based on everyone having their own AI ball, which will help them navigate the world, manage their Bitcoin, work as a Bitcoin wallet. So I've been along that prediction for a long time, but Brian Rommel is doing it. So he's got a business that's actually training different devices to be your own AI. He's sort of at the forefront of predicting these things. And he was on Jordan Peterson's show for the day, sort of really coming into his own as an intellectual celebrity, right? You know, you're in the golden age when people like him are celebrities, by the way, right? It's a great thing, like Jordan Peterson being a celebrity, golden age sign, right? So got a lot of those good signs out there today. So here's what he said about the Larry Fink thing. And I want to remind you that he is, again, the world expert in large language models and everything that goes on with prompt engineering of humans as well. All right. So we're going to talk about prompt engineering in a second. So Brian says the following: to all those that bought into Bitcoin is bad propaganda, meet one of the folks that pulled your strings. Over 10 years of his tenderizing of brains, so you look over there. Meanwhile, your $1,000 could have earned you $160 million. So he's going from the point at which Fink starts saying, oh, no good. And by the way, if you guys didn't know, Brian Rommel, even despite all of this recent fame and attention he's had because of AI, is still publishing stuff on home mining Bitcoin and how everyone should run their own Bitcoin node and all kinds of those things, right? So I think most Bitcoiners, if they're not aware of him, would recognize a lot of what he says as super sophisticated and credible. Brian Rommel comes out and says that. Now, he also shared another story yesterday, and this one is amazing. And it really goes into the heart of how human beings are programmed. And I didn't know anything about this, but it goes back into that, exactly what he's saying. So what he's saying about Fink here, you know, look over there, it's kind of a magician's trick, or, you know, not so different from hypnosis, right? Very similar to those things. And of course, humans are susceptible to these kinds of manipulations. And here's how, and all of us, me, you, everyone, right? So remember, we can't exclude ourselves from these weaknesses. They are features of the human mind and are unavoidable. You can do your best to protect against them. You can change your mind real quick by being influenced by another force, but nevertheless, prompt engineering works on human beings just as it works on AI. And so with that story of Fink and the Bitcoin and the BlackRock thing, Brian Rommel also published this yesterday on Twitter. He tweeted this following story. It's about candy and an amazing thing that happened in the Philippines that I had never heard about. And it's remarkable. So I'll tell you what happened. Even when someone finds out how they have been programmed, many don't care. A Philippine candy brand called Copico sent doctors candy to give away to pregnant mothers as a marketing strategy and rolled out a coffee product a year later that tasted the same. It was a hit with their kids so much that it became the third largest brand in the nation. As it turns out, the menu of a pregnant woman not only tunes the fetal senses to certain smells and tastes, but also physically transforms the fetal brain, creating a predisposition in the child for certain taste preferences. I've noticed this, for example, my father can't eat spice at all. My mother can, and I'm the biggest spice fiend you'll ever meet. Like, I drink Tabasco sauce. My favorite food is hot sauce. Everything else is just a way to get hot sauce in me. But that's all I crave. I crave Tabasco every day, lunch and dinner. I'll mess with other sauces here and there, but I'm a Tabasco guy and love Tabasco. So, my father can't even go near the stuff. So I have always known that I inherited my taste from my mother, but it's not necessarily genetic. It is one of these experience things that that you're calibrated while you're in the fetus. So this is what he goes on to say. This largely explains the results of studies that have shown that if the mother ate a lot of food with garlic or vanilla flavor in the last 3 months of pregnancy, the newborn prefers milk that smells like garlic or vanilla over any other. Companies not only know this, but use this knowledge to their advantage. Copico, a popular, successful brand of candy in the Philippines, sold in every family shop in every Philippine city, has found a way to conquer the taste buds of unborn babies. Wholesalers of this brand openly supply obstetricians and other doctors with Copico candies to distribute to pregnant women and women in labor in maternity wards. Months later, it rolled out a coffee product which tasted like the candy, which became hugely successful with kids. Lindstrom says that mothers would even give agitated newborn babies the coffee, which quickly calmed them down. 4 years later, Copico has become the third largest brand in the Philippines. So an amazing story, right? A completely amazing story. And shows you exactly how humans can be persuaded, can be motivated, and how incentives can be programmed before you even know you want it, right? Which is incredible. Now, all of that said, the amount of propaganda that goes into programming people, it's not just taste buds. That's one of the easier ones. It's other things too. And the following story has been erupting on Twitter for days. And this is where we're going to get the farming humans, farming men ideas, what he says. But this comes from Owen Benjamin. So Owen Benjamin, sort of famous podcaster. He has received, I don't know how much criticism in the past couple of days. What he did was he shared, so he's calling nuclear bombs fake and that everything that you know about nuclear bombs since World War II is propaganda. Now, I'm not agreeing with him. Right? This is not, I don't know anything about nuclear bombs, nothing, right? So I've seen them explode. They look really bad, and I understand why people are afraid of them, and I'm afraid of them, all right? So we're not talking about anything further than that. I'm not trying to persuade you that I agree with Owen Benjamin in any way. But what I want to do is underline what Owen Benjamin is experiencing here. So he produced all these arguments, said, how did they get cameras near these nuclear explosions? Like, how did that happen? Like, why isn't the camera destroyed? And then everyone's, they have telescopic lenses on the cameras. Okay, right? So all of this stuff, right? And so here's Owen Benjamin's summary of the days since he started arguing that nuclear weapons are fake and the people that have come to argue him and debate him and what they've been saying, right? So he goes back to the camera question. Okay, if these were shot from a bunker at a safe 5-mile distance, why is the blast coming from the same direction as the bunker? The blast is literally coming from either the side or directly from the position of the camera. And then, of course, the shot inside the house. So there's one where you're inside one of these houses and you see like the mannequins melting away and all of this stuff. And he's like, well, how do they get the camera inside the house? Why is the camera okay and everything else is disintegrating? So he says the blast is, and then, of course, the shot inside the house has a few moments of smoke and debris destroying everything, except apparently the periscope that was recording it from under the house. The only shot that appears to be genuine and not a tiny model is the massive blast at the end, and that appears to be recorded with a long lens from a distance. According to Galen Windsor, who was part of the Manhattan Project, those explosions were massive amounts of TNT. I hope that helps. I can see my precious video is revealing a lot of rage and anger in people. You should be relieved to know that you aren't going to be nuked. And yes, a bunch of governments can be in on it together, just like thousands of McDonald's all over the world can sell you fake meat every day. Governments are just the farmers of men. And when a new mind control product hits the market, many use it. So, look, I don't know anything about nuclear. We don't care, right? But what he's saying here about the government being farmers of men, it's what we were talking about the other day with the Social Security number system, right? Of course, the national debt of the United States is 100% based on the yield you can get from an individual person and the amount of debt that they can assume. The debt is opened in the name of people using the Social Security number system because it's the Social Security number that is used to collateralize the debt. Really, like that's not a conspiracy theory, right? That's actually the physical implementation of how Treasury functions with the Federal Reserve, right? It goes into debt. The debt is secured by your Social Security number and my and everybody's Social Security number, right? That's why population goes up, debt goes up, debt amount goes up. That's why they always have to change the debt limit, right? When you get into these arguments about the debt limit, now, of course, it's all just fake. They're going to have to raise the limit every time. So we call that fake every time. But the debt limit literally is how much an individual can bear in the overall debt of the nation, right? So they have to change the amount of debt they can load onto your Social Security number. That's my understanding of it anyway. If I'm missing something, please tell me. But that's my understanding of how human yield farming works from a Treasury point of view, right? So if you're going to yield farm human beings, what you got to do is have a number like a Social Security number to attach to them, and then you can associate debt with each individual account, for lack of a better word. It's an account, right? Not a person. So this idea of using these types of prompt engineering, how susceptible we all are to it, and even the nuclear question, right? Of course, the nuclear question being probably the most important motivating factor, the biggest fear that helped shape politics since World War II. I mean, almost everything that happened in the years after had to do with that. The missile gap, the arms race, mutually assured destruction, like almost all of these little bits of logic is what kept or what charted the course for 20th century life. So now that we're sort of coming up to questioning that life, of course, we're talking about the motivations and the incentives and what went wrong and how do we get into this place and all of those things, right? Ask any Japanese person. Again, I think you're hallucinating, Mark. I am not agreeing. I'm just saying, right? Just saying that it's worth talking about from a persuasion point of view, right? Hiroshima were even the most damaged. Look, I don't want to argue the nuclear thing. So Johnny, I think, is saying like, maybe not. We're not trying to argue that. I don't care. Right? I don't care about nuclear bombs right now. I don't. All I want to say is nuclear bomb dangers and the knowledge of them helped chart most of the important political threads of the late 20th century, right? The fear that we all assumed was real because of that. Doesn't matter what you think about nuclear bombs. It helped sort of create that situation, right? So there you go. Now, again, this whole incentive piece is almost what guaranteed this would happen. Once you create that kind of a system, once you are so afraid and you are living in a world of mutually assured destruction, or as Oppenheimer said, I am Vishnu, destroyer of worlds, or whatever he said, right? You're now dealing with a level of fear that you've got to prioritize, right? And that's just how the human mind works. Fear will trump almost anything else when it comes to persuasion. If you are convinced that there's a reason to be afraid, you're going to move into survival mode in order to achieve some form of cognitive closure. We've talked about persuasion before here. I was going to do a board on it today. I ran out of time a little bit, but the persuasion board looks like this, right? You have this privileged moment where you get information, right? That's the first part of persuasion. You get this information, and the sort of distraction is put there, right? You put something into that early piece where you have this privileged moment, you have this information, and then exactly as Brian Rommel mentioned, right? You have this focused illusion. In the case of what Brian Rommel mentioned when it came to the baby thing, right? It's literally hypnotizing people into wanting this chocolate. And then what ends up happening to the human mind is it creates a cause and effect relationship, and that forces your survival instinct to be triggered. And until that is satisfied, you won't have cognitive closure. Until you find a way to check off the threat, it's going to remain a priority. And that's how this persuasion system has worked for many years. And anyone who knows how to hijack human brain knows that it's impenetrable as far as you can't really defend against some of this stuff, right? The best you can do is lose attention for it and then get influenced by something else. But it's very difficult to defend yourself from this stuff, especially if the illusion is convincing enough. And nuclear bombs, not saying they're illusions, but they're a convincing argument, right? When you see the destruction and you see the capacity. But indeed, the incentive thing is what matters, right? That anyone who wants to rule by fear, right? You simply need to show that security can be found if you choose these options. So you create this fearful thing, and then you offer solutions, and everyone comes to you, right? This is what human farming is, right? You just create a situation where you're going to be the platform on which people will grow and be successful and be happy and all of these things. And that largely explains the success of the American system over these past 2 years, right? It was the safest place vis-a-vis all of these other things and all these other dangers and risks and all that stuff. And so that's why, so many people have been happy to come to America. The incentive is just aligned, right? But now let's take a look at this Bill Ackman story, right? So Bill Ackman, if you don't know who Bill Ackman is, big liberal, big Democrat donor, has been a Democrat for years, wildly hated by Trumpsters and all of these things. But he's become very interested in RFK lately. So he wrote the other day, and he has this long tweet there. I'm not going to read it all, but here's what happened, right? He says, I tweeted that Robert Kennedy Jr. raised some important questions about vaccine safety, and I am now being labeled a QAnon conspiracist by some and a member of the alt-right by others. I have long believed that incentives drive all human behavior. This gives me reason to be open to the potential risks and conflicts as more and more vaccines are prescribed for our children. So now he just starts talking about the what we've all talked about here many times, right? That the incentive to create a vaccine for children is far greater. The financial incentive is far greater than to create a normal medicine for normal adults, because there's less trials. It's easier to get it to market. There's the moral question ever since the polio days about how you get a vaccine to market. So there you go. The reason he started to realize, and this is all Kennedy has been saying for years now, right? For years, his stance on vaccines has been this: not anti-vaccine at all, anti the business model that is used to create vaccines, which is you don't need to test them, you don't need to do any of this stuff, right? There is this sort of ethical, moral question around vaccines, which allows them to be marketed directly and to the public when they are proven that they work, because it would be ethically bad to keep them from children for whatever reason, blah, 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 who knows. But that's what they've been given for years now. That's why the liability for the drug makers were taken out, for vaccine drug makers were taken out in the 1980s by Ronald Reagan. Perhaps his biggest failure, which no one knew about until RFK made a point about it. So I was not that aware of it. I'd heard about this stuff before. I'm not ignorant to vaccines prior to COVID, but I didn't really take it that seriously, right? Didn't think it was sort of a big deal. But this business model thing is a problem. And Robert Kennedy has believed for years that's why we have so many vaccines, simply because they're more profitable to create, they're easier to get to market, they're easier to pass some of the hurdles. So that's a big deal, right? And when you start to think of the Philippine candy story that Brian Rommel shared, when you start to think about the story around just hiding this stuff and how you can hide it in plain sight and how you can use this diversionary magic. It looks a lot like the BlackRock story as well, right? He went for years saying, oh, it's a scam, Bitcoin's a scam. But all of a sudden, right, overnight, once the competition from the domestic industry or the native industry, let's call it, of Bitcoin, right, all the people that got started, who are getting blown out day by day, right? You're still seeing all these fights between everyone over money from the last cycle. And now these new guys are here and, sort of sharpening their blades and ready to go. Thinking of this sense of how you can persuade someone, how you can manipulate them, how you can human farm based on fear, based on all this stuff, you see it used again and again, right? And now, take this one, for example, all this conversation about what everyone's saying with this judgment that came out on July 4th about government colluding with big tech to censor people. And what does that mean? And how can that happen? And now they're not allowed to do it. So everyone freaking out. Oh, this was all we had to fight disinformation, NBC and MSNBC and all these other people are talking about. The New York Times had this article yesterday. Disinformation researchers fret about fallout from judge's order. Li Fang, who is one of the Twitter files guys, Li Fang writes, New York Times claims court injunction against government censors would impede the work of disinfo researchers. The first expert quoted runs the UNC think tank that helped produce a report claiming Asian American opposition to affirmative action is a form of disinformation, right? So that Asian Americans disagree. The Asian Americans are the people who brought this affirmative action case to the courts because they were getting the most discriminated against at Harvard and UNC. So this guy actually says, no, even those guys are disinfo, right? So Li Fang goes on to say, disinformation research is largely a fake partisan project draped in an academic veneer. Look at any major university center studying the topic and pick apart their studies. They essentially claim anyone who opposes their political agenda is doing disinformation, right? So I think we all know that here. We've been talking about that kind of stuff for a long time. Have you guys seen this attempt of Facebook, Meta, to come out with their Twitter clone competition? So it came out a couple of days ago. I think it's called Threads or something. It's already censoring everybody. It's already saying your post was removed. You get this one guy. Anyone think this can become bigger than Twitter, right? And Zuckerberg comes in and his new thread things. It'll take some time, but I think there should be a public conversations app with 1 billion plus people on it. Twitter has had the opportunity to do this, but hasn't nailed it. Hopefully we will, right? Jim Cramer says, Instagram is a truly terrific product and Twitter is awful, right? So our favorite Jim Cramer, who gets everything wrong. And there's a bunch of cases like that out there. You've got, what's his name? Mark Cuban came on to the threads. Oh, this is fun. There's no one fighting because everything's so great right now. No one's disagreeing here. But I saw this morning that already, Carla and Walker, the crypto couple, she was censored on it. And I think she was putting up like nothing controversial. So she's already been censored. I've seen a few other people get censored, and doesn't look like it's going that great, right? And you can even see this. So that whole pretext there that these people are begging for is they don't want to be confronted with what's happening on Twitter anymore. They want to be safe from that. They don't want to have to deal with the uncomfortable stuff that you can read there sometimes. Oh, you live in a kleptocracy in America, right? You no longer a republic. People can't handle that, right? Which is why we call this show The Breakup. It really has a lot to do with ending a relationship with something that is, past its expiration date and is sort of suffering from entropy and, dying a slow death. So when you stop and think about the ability of these folks to persuade, to use persuasion, to use these illusions, to use magic tricks, to use, as I said, BlackRock magic, look over there, and then things are happening here, right? So you see this sort of going on throughout society, and one of the most obvious examples of it, and one of the critical industries that I think is going to fail entirely as we move to a Bitcoin standard, and I think really is the symptom of all of this gaslighting and all of this black magic and all of this BlackRock magic and all of this persuasion and prompt engineering of human beings, and as Owen Benjamin called it, the farming of men, right? You can actually see it in this whole mental health thing, right? Because when I look now on Instagram, you know what I see on Instagram? Just a bunch of people with mental health issues. That's it. All these women with the makeup, beautiful women, right? I only see mental health problems now. I see nothing else. Nothing else when I look at Instagram. Even these people that are good looking, right? I just see broken brains and effed up people trying to get attention for their boobs or their muscles or whatever it is, right? And that continues to be mostly what I see out there. If I look at most politicians, I see mental illness. If you look on the street, you see mental illness everywhere, right? A lot of liberal politics now are just mental illness. And even at that, it's mental illness that no one will call out, right? The whole idea right now of being a liberal Democrat, really like being an engaged liberal Democrat, is to ignore mental illness. You can't be one. You cannot be a active liberal Democrat within the Democrat Party today. And I don't mean people like Kennedy, and I don't mean Kennedy Democrats, and I don't mean people who want to change, right? You can still be a Democrat, I think. But other than that, I just see mental illness straight across the board. So it's funny now that living in this era of gaslighting, using fake money to create fake incentives, to gaslight people using fear, and to farm humans so that you can persuade them to have a set group of opinions that'll serve your benefit, right? Like we saw the candy makers do in the Philippines. That's just a small example. You can do that on almost anything, right? And you're starting to see it sort of get questioned. And that's why we take a psychological frame here when we talk about the economy and when we talk about Bitcoin and we talk about the dollars. The actual economy, right? The best way I have to describe it, and I stole it from Scott Adams, is the idea that the economy is a psychological engine, right? It's a psychological engine. It perpetuates itself based on the psychological conditions of the people perpetuating it. That's why Bitcoin's psychological engine hums so perfectly. It's made up of playable characters who are not as prone to being gaslit, who are rejecting a lot of these frames, rejecting fear of nuclear annihilation, rejecting fear of the Zaporizhia nuclear plant, right? Did I lose sleep over Ukraine? No. I wish people wouldn't die there. I don't care. Right, but I can't. I don't have that kind of capacity, right? Anyone who goes to Ukraine knows what they're getting into. I can't care about that, right? Now, if it was up to me, I would stop. If I had a magic wand, I would just stop it today. I don't want people dying there. But at the same time, I'm not going to let the terrible things happen there and the fear of that thing growing wider affect the rest of my worldview and all of these things, right? So it's not something that I'm going to embrace. I'm not going to embrace fear and some dystopic look, because what Bitcoiners are doing simultaneous to this is using our psychological engine to perpetuate a better future. I always say that the major advantage Bitcoiners have is that it's very easy for us to imagine a utopia based on the things we're doing today and the things we're building today. It is not possible in fiat. You cannot imagine a better world based on the systems as they are. Or if you do, you've got to imagine that some charismatic boomer comes around and gets everyone on the same team, and it's just not going to happen, right? The best we can do is what RFK is offering in that tell the truth. Right? It's the gaslighting, it's the lying, it's the tricking, it's the, be afraid of nuclear annihilation. It's all of this shit that's led to the mental health collapse that we've experienced in the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years in America. But really since, Trump was elected, that was sort of the big brain-breaking event in America. And now you get more and more people actually criticizing psychiatry itself. Now, as a Bitcoiner, we talk a lot about Jungian psychiatry. It is not the same as whatever this psychiatry is, right? Jungian psychology is not, and psychiatry is not like, well, it's psychology. It's not psychiatry. Psychiatry is medical stuff. That's why medical doctors are the only psychiatrists, and non-medical doctors are psychologists. So psychology in general, of course, is not a fake science, but a lot of the people practicing psychiatry are starting to criticize it. So I think in terms of Jungian psychology all the time, I think Bitcoin fits into that because we all have an ego, we have a shadow. In order to get your shadow integrated with your ego, which is a process we all have to do constantly, perpetually for all our lives, it never ends. You have to first encounter things. If you can't count, you can't encounter. And Bitcoin helps you do that. What the fiat system has done is it has allowed our entire society and individuals in that society to suppress their shadow. They do not have to encounter it. They do not need to look at it. They can continue to ignore it. The problem with ignoring your shadow is it will manifest anyway, and it will come out and leak out like in all the worst ways. And you're seeing it throughout society right now. Now, the good news is people are starting to criticize psychiatry as a discipline. Now, I think this is a symptom of the actual fiat system corroding and decaying to the point where we do have this mental health crisis. The mental health crisis is 100% linked to the incentives and the entropy and decay in the money system, because again, that's what is suppressing us from dealing with our shadow. America can't take account of what it's done if it can't actually even look at the bill, right? It can't. We have no idea how much dollars there are. There's no one knows, right? Nobody knows. No one knows. Come on. It's impossible. So what Saifedean ends up saying, so this MD, Paul Minot, comes out and says, I've been practicing psychiatry for 38 years. I love my job, my peers, and my patients, but I've come to the conclusion that I'm practicing in the biggest intellectual scam of this era. Right? We claim to be science, but have no understanding. So Saifedean comes in, and this is like catnip to Saifedean, right? Because he believes psychiatry is the most fiat profession, and it is, only because it's dealing with all the broken, gaslit brains that have been created by the entropy of the fiat system. So here's what he says. What's remarkable about the criminal pseudoscience that is psychiatry is how it declared itself a respectable science based purely on the assertions of its pharma-funded high priests without ever offering any demonstrable benefits or testable conclusions. There was never a mental illness that was eliminated by following the tenets of psychiatry, for it to pretend to be anything less despicable than snake oil salesmanship. Quite the opposite. The growth of this scam led to an explosion of mental illness diagnosis and pharma profits. Psychiatry is a perfect example of a fiat science. Nothing it claims was ever demonstrated scientifically. Everything decreed by conscious-free intellectual midgets from government-protected monopoly agencies sponsored by the pharma criminals who profit from it. The scam of psychiatry is the pathologization of unpleasant human emotion. Rather than dealing with grief or taking charge of your life to avoid recurring bad outcomes, psychiatrists tell you it's all chemicals in your head which can only be fixed with their sponsors' poisons. There's no such thing as mental illness, and the idea that bad emotions are caused by chemical imbalances is astonishingly stupid with exactly zero scientific evidence. Life was never a walk in the park for anyone. Bad things happen and humans feel bad. Pharma poisons don't fix this. He says, read Thomas Szaz's. I was a big fan of Szaz's, and that's Szazz. I was a big fan of Szaz's, but only now, thanks to Free Society, did I realize he literally used the term fiat standard to describe psychiatric diagnosis in this fascinating article. So, fiat standard, right? And the article is what counts as disease? The gold standard of disease versus the fiat standard of diagnosis, right? Fake psychiatry, major problem, right? Major problem. But the good news is we're fixing it, right? We're getting all of this stuff done, and we're at the cusp of a golden age because of this, right? We're at the cusp of getting rid of psychiatry. And remember, we've talked about the history of how this prompt engineering works, right? It goes back to Freud himself. Freud made a lot of discoveries around this. And then his nephew, who came to America and wrote the book Propaganda, which had to change its title to, what was Propaganda called? Something about policy. Anyway, he had a lot to do with it. So there you go. Things are exciting. All right, let me read some comments here and see where we're at. So I'm back here. I think it's worth questioning everything. So do I, Johnny. But I'm not going to go out and promote this idea. I'm not going to believe it. Like I don't want to. I wouldn't go stand in a nuke test site. Put it that way, right? And I'm not a fan of what I've heard about radiation. So I'm not going to be the one testing it. How does debt growth exceed population growth? Well, the debt ceiling can be raised per person. Like it's not fixed. So you can raise the amount per head, which is what the debt ceiling debate always is, right? Fake nukes would be a great bluff by the West to intimidate the rest of the world. Yeah, look, it just makes sense, right? You don't. Truth is not what I'm talking about here. I don't know the truth, right? I don't believe that nukes are fake, but I wouldn't be surprised if they are, right? That's the difference that I've experienced since COVID. It's the wouldn't be surprised if, right? I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be like, what? No way. At this point, I'd be like, whoa, another scam. Wow, So that's where we're at. Good morning, Daniel. Hope you're doing well. I'm leaving Vermont today for a couple of days till Sunday. People need to stop apologizing to outrage mobs. Yeah. Agreed. Thanks. No problem. Entrepreneur de Nevoy. Entrepreneur de Nevoy. I don't know what's that going to mean. Good day, Bitcoin folks. Fellowships of the blockchain. We love it. Nothing to fear but fear itself. Thank you, Rickster Swickster. That is absolutely true. Absolutely true. Good morning, Catacombs. Hope you're doing well. Good morning, Bitcoin gang. Hope you're doing well. Gold 106. Anti-vax is a total midwit slur. Some vaccines have saved millions from death and misery. Others have proved dangerous. Exactly. Like no one is out there denying the model of a vaccine, like the concept. Of course, I'm not. Of course, go for it, right? But there's a lot we've learned about polio that's a scam too, right? I've been listening to RFK on the polio stuff. Not that simple. TikTok mental health centers is what we need next. Oh, TikTok's bad. that's, I don't even, I've never even actually gone on TikTok, to be honest. I don't know what's happening over there. I've seen a lot of TikToks when they get reproduced on Twitter, but what I see over there is just mental health trouble. Just mental health trouble. That's it. That is it. Right. The human farming debt yield system is without a doubt real. After spending too much time in that rabbit hole, I discovered a likely solution. That's why I'm here. Exactly. No, it is real, Matt. It is like it's perhaps not as dehumanizing originally as it has become, but it's the Matrix for all intents and purposes. Much more likely than humans as batteries is humans as debt envelopes, collateralized debt envelopes. Why is anything a color? Why is it BlackRock? Why is it the White House? Yeah. Color coding. Yeah. Yeah, that's persuasion right there. That's persuasion. 100% persuasion. Yeah. Fix the money, fix the world. Yeah, absolutely. Diesel Kane says, why is a blue whale actually gray? It's true. We don't know. We don't know. Sounds like scientists from Atlas Shrugged. Yeah, there's a new Atlas Shrugged that's going to be made. I just saw, just rewatched Atlas 1, 2, and 3 in the last few days. It's great. Naomi Brockwell. She's Naomi Brockwell, big Bitcoiner. She's in that movie. A friend of mine. Bitcoin fixes it. Everything. Yeah, absolutely. Exciting. The collective consciousness is becoming aware of the threats against society. I think so. Yeah, I think so. Public relations. Thank you. Thank you. That is the coded word that propaganda turned into, public relations. This is some of the best news heard in a lifetime. Finally, cognitive closure. That's what it's all about, is cognitive closure, right? Yeah, Bernays. We're talking about Bernays. Change the world, propaganda. Yeah, thank you, Signs and Signals. Bernays. It was Freud's nephew. Yeah, one thing you can't do anymore is surprises. No. Every damn thing in America is a scam. Basically, yeah, it's not the country we thought it was. But the country we thought it was is still there. It's there. Because the country it isn't still created itself off of that. It's a bit of the Hermetic stuff, right? Everything is simply polarity on a continuum. So it's the ego and shadow part of America. And that's why Bitcoin has the capacity to flip that, right? To spin it in its natural course. What we were talking about 2 days ago, this characterization of America as imperial power or revolutionary force. It's Bitcoin that can help push it into that. Bitcoin can be the solar gravitational force that forces the world into this, or America into this orbital spin that will allow it to change. Which is how I see it, right? Reality as opposed to truth, more applicable and useful, as well as welcoming further communication, begins with everything, indeed. The Amish are the ultimate health control group. How are they doing? Well, no, they're not the ultimate health control group, Robert. They're not. They're too different. They're too different to measure. So if you're saying, like, how are they doing with the COVID thing? They also get sun. They also exercise. They also don't watch television. They're also not sitting all day. They also have community, like all these other things that are really helpful. So you couldn't use them for just the vaccine. You can use them to measure society as a control group, but they're useless for the vaccine. So, because I have seen that out there. Oh, the vaccine, we know the vaccine's no good because the Amish, blah, blah, blah. Now, I'm not arguing the vaccine is good. I'm arguing against using the Amish as a control group because they do too much different for them to be a control group. It could be anything else that they do, right? Anything. Like, they're healthy people. They eat well. Could it be the food? They're the only ones who eat well, right? So they're the ultimate control group for health in general, but not of a specific event in society. So for COVID, they're useless. They'll use this. Cannabis rules. Need to know, indeed. Luck comes to those who prepare for opportunity, Bitcoin. Absolutely. This is going to be a great run for all us Bitcoiners, by the way. Next year is going to be amazing. 2024 is hot. Still a little trouble in 2023. I was reading some Bowtied Bull this morning. He's saying Q4 rough stuff. I kind of agree with that. And he was right about it last year. So there you go. CBDC did is becoming running by Shiba Inu now. This is the story of your enslavement on your YouTube short video on human farming. Yeah. Slarty Blartfast. Yeah, look, I'm not Slarty Blartfast, not arguing that I know anything about nuclear science or physics or any of it. None. None. Just talking about the reaction. Just talking about, what I liked about. So I'm reading Owen Benjamin for the entertainment, right? It's entertaining to read his stuff, and especially what's going on these days with the nuclear thing. And it makes you think. I'm not convinced by it, but his logic around fear and human farming is all I wanted to pull on as far as the thread, because it applies to other things. So you can take it from an example that's maybe not true and apply it to other things that are true, because the cognitive closure piece is real, right? So Slutty Bloodfast, please no one hallucinate and imagine that I am arguing that I know something special about nuclear physics or nuclear energy, because I don't. I don't know anything special about it. I am not going to volunteer to go to a nuclear test site because I doubt the capacity of the bombs. Not doing that, right? So I'm more just trying to talk about fear and the way nuclear weapons were used. Need to know. I'm not arguing the vaccine is real. Yeah. We don't know. Just like when somebody spoils the punchline to a joke, their secret agendas just don't work when we know their intentions. Yeah. That's why it's important for us to continue to say the quiet part out loud. And the world, I really feel, is getting to that point. Like, I don't feel worried about saying things in public like I did a year ago. And the ability to gaslight is ending quickly, right? Yeah, they all eat natural food. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's just very difficult to use Amish as a control group, except if you're doing everything, right? And I don't even know if they look that healthy, frankly. I go to the Amish places all the time. They're a little, they're not in that great shape, frankly. A lot of pie, I think. Sugar still affects people, right? They're allowed to eat sugar. And they're probably loading up on the seed oils, I bet. They have trouble getting cooking oil. Well, they probably just use lard. Yeah. I see that the anti-vaxxer is mass media name calling, like what Trump does single-handedly when he comes up with a new nickname for a foe. Yeah. The Trumps are so good. Where's Hunter? The United States of America is the sovereign republic. The United States is a private servicing corporate entity. Absolutely. Yeah. And I often, you'll see in some of my headlines, I'll say USA Inc. Right? I'll write that very regularly. USA Inc. The all caps names are a real thing. We should all be outraged to find out we are cattle. It is a real thing. I told you, my one daughter who does not have a social security number is the only person in our family who has not all caps in her ID, which is incredible. 2024 Bitcoin. Yeah, I may higher than that, Adam. Your face is about to melt in 2024. Smash the like before you get liquidated. Indeed. The sovereign republic cannot be sued, but the private corporate entity can be sued. Yeah. And that's what as I said, I use America Inc. Yeah. You'll see a bunch of my headlines are USA Inc., USA Inc., USA Inc. I don't want bad things to happen to America. I want bad things to happen to USA Inc., right? I don't care about them. We love America. Right? All right, team. That's all I got for today. I'll be on FedWatch today at 12:30. So come check out Bitcoin Magazine for that. I'll be with Ansel Linder. We'll be talking, I bet, about BlackRock. I bet about Powell. and all the other Federal Reserve macroeconomic stuff going on in the world. So join us 12:30 today. Going to be a lot of fun. I love doing the show with Ansel. And if you want to talk more price stuff about the prediction, his stuff is right on target. So he's an excellent bellwether to follow and knows his stuff. All right, team. I shall see you all later. I'll be back tomorrow live from the Montreal studio. Same time. Peace.